Good morning. Welcome to Watershed. We're so glad that you're here, whether you're in person or maybe outside, or if you're joining us online on Facebook or YouTube. We want to welcome you. If you are online, we'd love to hear kind of where you're from, where you're tuning in from, maybe where you're watching from, and maybe you can say hi to the people who are online. If you're in person, if you're outside, we'd like to invite you to stand as we begin this morning by singing together. thought I had to cover my weakness, my shame. I held tight to my religion. I thought I had to earn my grace. But you would bring to remembrance the things that I forgot, the sacred curiosity of becoming undone. And no more fake personas, and no more false perceptions. And all you ever wanted was me. And with childlike eyes of wonder, and a heart that's undivided, I'm beginning to see you. So I come into the clear to dance with perfect peace. It's safe here to unravel. It's safe here to be seen. So with all my imperfections, I will rise and I will shine. 'Cause I'm not afraid of shadows when I'm held by holy light. No more fake personas, no more false perceptions. And all you ever wanted was me. Childlike eyes of wonder, in a heart that's undivided, I'm beginning to see Now I see you everywhere, 'cause you were everywhere when I was free, bittersweet. You're here with me. Now I see you everywhere, 'cause you were everywhere ask you to close your eyes for just a moment as we continue. In the stillness of this moment, I want to remind you that you are loved. That in all the fear and pain and pandemic and the political and the stress and the busyness, you are loved. And you have the capability of being loved. You deserve love. And you have the capability of giving love. So as we go into this morning, we want to start there. We want to start from this deep place of love. Thank you for singing this morning. You can be seated.
Well, good morning. My name is David. I'm one of the pastors here on staff. Thank you for being here this morning. A little bit before our service this morning started, I was telling Austin that the order of songs deprived me of what I thought would be a phenomenal opportunity, which was, you see, the first song, many of you may have heard before, sung before, perhaps in the early 2010s at whatever previous church you attended. And the construction of the song is unique in that it's kind of anthemically rousing, emotionally powerful, and for those of us in this space, perhaps vaguely traumatic and nostalgically haunting. And it would have left all of you, all of us, in the ideal emotional state for me to transition into what is my very first announcement this morning, which is that we need volunteers. So you're just going to have to pretend that instead of that other wonderful song that we just finished singing, that we just got done with that first one, and everyone's kind of feeling the adrenaline that that song created in our bodies, as you listen to me tell you about the volunteer opportunities here at Watershed. There are many. First and foremost, we are looking for volunteers in Greenhouse, which is our children's space. We call them soil mates here, which is very clever, play on soulmates, if that wasn't obvious. And really, there are all sorts of opportunities and kind of starting points for you to plug in our greenhouse space. You can do everything from come in during the week and help with setups. You don't actually have to interact with any children, which might be a perk for some of you, all the way up to being an experienced director, which sort of helps run point for the morning, and then any number of opportunities in between. Very important, obviously. Kids are important. We have a lot of them. And so we are always, always, always looking for volunteers in the greenhouse space. There was probably never a time where if you were to ask the question, do you need help in greenhouse, where the answer would be no. The answer is always yes. Additionally, we have an incredible tech team. Everything that's happening right now, including the fact that you can hear my voice, is made possible by this team. Believe it or not, and I am a little skeptical myself, you don't actually need prior technical experience to be part of this team. In fact, they can teach you. Again, I have some skepticism, but I have been reassured multiple times by Desmond Smith, our tech director, that you can show up completely green, and they will teach you everything you need to know. So if you do or do not consider yourself tech savvy, which should cover everyone in the room, then I would encourage you to consider volunteering for the tech team. Those are probably our two biggest needs right now, but in addition to those, I am always recruiting for the student space. Lots of fun hanging out with teenagers. There's a lot of things going on in their heads right now, and so you get to, kind of participate in that, contribute to, directing their heads towards the better things in life. But it's a lot of fun. We have a good time downstairs in the student cellar, which is what we call it. And then the hospitality team would be kind of the final thing I want to highlight. If you think of yourself as especially gifted at smiling with your eyes, then the hospitality team may in fact be for you. Obviously, we are Sean just got it. Obviously, we are masked up indoors and will be for a long time probably. And so if you think you can convey a sense of welcome and warmth, primarily with the upper part of your face, then I would love to talk to you, because the hospitality team might be a great place for you to start and plug in. That kind of sums it up, but also provides a wonderful transition to the second thing I want to draw your attention to, which is our end of summer bash taking place, weather permitting, of course, outside immediately following the service next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. Going to have opportunities for children. I think like an inflatable bouncy house, which is fun. Careful with your shoulders. I've dislocated mine in those before. But there's going to be food trucks. It's just going to be a great opportunity to hang out, perhaps meet some new people, and just sort of celebrate what is hopefully the end of oppressive humidity here in the South. And here's where the transition sort of plays in. We do have a few volunteer opportunities for that as well. So if you're not looking for a long-time commitment, which is more of some of those other opportunities that I just described, you kind of want to just a one-off, get your feet wet, dip your toes in the water, some other metaphors like that, then shoot an email to Samantha, normal spelling, Samantha at watershed.charlotte.com. She can plug you into any number of one-off opportunities next Sunday that'll help us get set up for what is sure to be a wonderful, wonderful time. Now, I have also made a couple mentions of people who might be new at Watershed. And if that's you, brand new, like this is your first Sunday and you're like, what did I just walk into? Or maybe vaguely new to the point where you're sort of getting a sense of what this is, but maybe still have some questions, then I want to direct you towards Preface. Preface is pretty much the ideal entry point, starting point for anyone who is new to Watershed, or if you've been here a long time and are still sort of a little bit confused about what you walked into some Sunday, some time ago, then I would encourage you to sign up for Preface. As you can see, it begins September 15th on Zoom. It's an opportunity to meet both of our founding co-pastors, Matt O'Neill and Scott Hofert. Some of the rest of the staff, including myself, pop in from time to time, but crucially, it's an opportunity to hear a little bit about the spiritual history of Watershed, but also explore ways where your own journey, your own story might intersect with ours, and even more importantly, might intersect with other people who have come to call Watershed home. So it's totally free. Just sign up. And we encourage you to do that because it's starting September 15th is going to be here shockingly soon, I assure you. All of these things, by the way, volunteer opportunities, signing up for Preface, and anything else that you might be curious about, pretty confident you can complete those signups, get more information, get your questions answered through the Watershed app. It's totally free. You can find it on all of the major app stores, and it's just a great way to stay completely up to speed and up to date on what's going on here, get plugged in, volunteer, things like that. It's also a place where you can securely give. And that's important because nothing that we do here would be possible without the ongoing generosity and ownership of so many of you. Everything from the things that the tech team does and the technology that they get to steward, to the supplies for the aforementioned greenhouse space, to our ability to throw end-of-summer bashes like we're doing next week is all made possible because of the ownership and the commitment all of you give to the work that Watershed is doing here, both in Charlotte and abroad. And so for those of you who continue to support us in that way, we thank you. For those of you who might be considering doing that, we thank you preemptively. And I want to point out a couple ways that you can do that safely and securely, including the app, which I mentioned, the Watershed website, which is also a great resource to find out a little bit more about how our finances are stewarded here. And then for the old school in the room, we do have secure giving boxes at the back and near the entrances. So that's about it for me, but one other thing that I kind of want to highlight and celebrate is that for at least a vast majority of our kids and students, school is starting this week. And so amidst the confusion, the fear, surely the frustration and trepidation that so many of us are feeling around navigating the questions of the pandemic and the challenges that we know that our families and also crucially our teachers are facing during this time, we just wanted to take a moment in our time together to just acknowledge our teachers, acknowledge our students. I want to invite some of our greenhouse children up to the stage with me, as well as my good friend Chris, who is going to preside over a blessing for our schools, for our students, our kids, and our teachers. If you would welcome them.
Hey, y'all. As David was saying, my name is Chris, and I serve on the Dreamhouse team that Blair has for Watershed, for Greenhouse. And as David said, we have school starting this week, or it's already started for some of us, or daycare. Yeah, come on up. So how y'all feeling about school this week? You like nervous, excited? You're excited? You have school in 8 days. Nice. Awesome. So while you're at school feeling all of these big emotions, we have this tag it says, "You are loved," to remember that God is always with you and God always loves you. So let's start with a new prayer to start our new beginning this week as school starts. So, God of fresh starts and new beginnings, we bring ourselves, our big feelings, and our backpacks, lunchboxes, diaper bags to you. Last year was different from what we expected. We couldn't see our friends or play on playgrounds. We learned at home in masks, 6 feet apart, or both. In all these changes, we may have felt sad or alone. God, our friend who comforts us, hold us close and wipe our tears. In our backpacks, we carry blank pages, sharpened pencils, and pointy crayons. And in our hearts, we carry lots of feelings, unanswered questions, and hopeful expectations. There are endless possibilities of what this year might bring, of what we might learn, who we might meet, and who we might become. God is always our friend who is with us. Remind us you are there. From the grown-ups going back to school, God, please be with them too. Thank you for our teachers, helpers, caregivers, leaders, and for all they do to help us learn and grow. God, our friend who is full of wonder, silly songs, snacks, and rest, fill our hearts with love and kindness for ourselves and others. Thank you for this beautiful world. Amen. All right, y'all, you can go up. And, yeah. And so for anyone else, if you have like friends who are teachers or you were a teacher yourself and you would like one, they're in a bin in the hallway, so feel free to pick one up if you would like.
As the kids are heading out, we're going to do another song, and I think often, maybe especially in the moment in history that we're in right now, it is easy to look externally for problems and issues and ways of blaming and shaming. It seems like everything is polarized in ways that keep us insulated from maybe looking inward. And we're going to do one of my absolute favorite songs by one of my absolute favorite artists. And one of the lines says, "Here I stand on the edge of the ledges that I made." And so as we're singing this song, maybe there are places and parts where we hold some measure of responsibility for the circumstances that we're in. And that by no means at all excuses or belittles the external ways that we are victims of systems and pain. But there are places in each of us that we do hold measures of responsibility for, in places where we have room for growth, we have opportunities for growth. So we're going to sing this song over you, and wherever that lands for you this morning, I want to welcome you into these next few moments. I got a lot of loose ends. I've done some damage. I've cut the ropes so it frayed. And I've got a lot of good friends keeping me distracted, keeping my sanity safe. I stand on the edge of the ledges I've made, looking for a steady hand. Here, I stand in the land full of rocks in the valleys, trying to be a better man. Cut the rope so afraid. And I got a lot of good friends keeping me distracted, keeping my sanity safe. Father's blood. And I take a little too much without giving back. If blessed are the meek, then I'm cursed. Here I stand on the edge of the ledges I've made, looking for a steady hand. Trying to
The stories of Ruth and Esther.
The way that Paul conceives of original sin and salvation in 1 Corinthians chapter 15.
Laws on sexual immorality. Because, we got a bunch of freaks in Watershed that need to get their act together.
The parable of the vineyard owner, Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16.
Jonah and the whale. Big fish. Whale?
In John 14, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. What does that even mean?
Good morning, Watershed. My name is Sean. It is really great to be here with you today. And thanks for those of you who have sent messages of love and strength this week. I got back yesterday from Costa Rica. I'll fill you in a little bit on why, but it has a lot to do with what I wanted to talk about today, even though I've been prepping this talk for a few weeks now. I'm dubbing 2021 the year of the matriarch. Both of my grandmothers left Earth this year. At 98 and 99 years of age, they were both born in the immediate wake of the last pandemic. And I can't help but think that grit, that tenacity, that perseverance were probably part of their birthright. My grandfathers, by contrast, have been gone from this earth for a long time, both dying very early and both leaving their respective wives to become head of household, to head their families alone. These two women raised 12 children among them and buried 5. I don't know that kind of strength, but to grow up with these matriarchs on both sides of my family has taught me a lot about the strength of women, about what it means to be an anchor. In February, I lost one grandmother. In April, the other. Then in July, just a few weeks ago, my own mom was diagnosed with cancer. Doctors found a tumor in her colon, so they operated on her, got that out along with half of her colon, and it has spread to both liver and lungs. So I just got back from Costa Rica to be with her, to try to give her some moral support. She starts chemo tomorrow. It's an aggressive, rare form of cancer. So, sorry for that, but you can see why I have women on the brain and in my heart. But also, the feminist in me, the brown in me, the immigrant in me is always invested in stories of the other. So when planning for this series came up, I naturally gravitated to stories of women. And in the Bible, while there are many, many, many great women, only 2 hold the distinction of having books named after them. I know I've said this before. I teach creative writing at a university here in Charlotte. I'm attuned to stories. I'm a storyteller myself. In the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, we encounter lots of short stories, but there are only 3 that get pulled into isolated books. A couple weeks back, Blair explored the tale of Jonah. The short story genre certainly shows up throughout Israel's history over and over again. If we look at these stories from the lens of literary analysis, we find really elevated stories told with fanfare and ceremony, complete with action-packed plots, romance, suspense, robust characters. If you're one that gravitates to the parables of the New Testament, then I think the short stories of the Torah or the Old Testament would hold your imagination equally. When we look at these stories closely, we see the stuff of legends. We see heroes. So today I want to delve into the stories of the Hebrew Bible, of Ruth particularly, and Esther. And as I said before, these women are remarkable, so much so that they're the only two books of the Bible named for women. In a year that is showing up for me with lots of suffering, in a year so profoundly centered on the women in my own life, I have been spending time with the women of the Bible. And these two are worth spending time with. And I realize it's a little bit of an ambitious and tall order to try to cover both of them on a Sunday morning, but my hope is maybe to whet your appetite enough to inspire you to spend some time with these ladies on your own. The books of Esther and Ruth illustrate God's redemptive promises, but they also showcase the strength, the tenacity, and intelligence of women. Esther is an orphan, Ruth a widowed foreigner. What sense of agency do these women have, especially in a world made by and for men, especially when they operate from deep within the margins of their otherness? And yet, Esther becomes queen and saves her Jewish people from certain annihilation. And Ruth becomes the ancestral grandmother to Jesus himself. These are women who do not passively wait for people to solve their problems, but rather orchestrate solutions that activate the men around them. At first glance, a reader might fail to see their greatness, especially given such humble beginnings. I'd like to start chronologically, which means we're going to start with Ruth. And growing up, I'll be honest, I grew up Catholic. She's the one I was more familiar with, and she represented the ultimate love story. I don't know if any of you guys ever grew up with the phrase, "I'm waiting on a Boaz, not a bozo." That maybe, I don't know, that's a Catholic thing. Don't tell. Anyway, that was like a little fun little joke that, whatever. Anyway, so the story of Ruth was framed by her obedience, at least when I was growing up. It was framed by her obedience. Her faithfulness is what got her a good husband. Hers were attributes to aspire to. But in those old tellings of the story, she wasn't exactly the central character, but rather an accessory to the major players, Naomi and Boaz. Obedient, faithful, loyal Ruth was rewarded for her good deeds, but I saw her only as the recipient of God's grace and providence. I failed to see how much she provided to secure her own future. When I read the story now, I see two women in beautiful relationship, actively fighting for a future worth having. Ruth and Naomi are both recently widowed at the beginning of the story. As single women, they have no economic, no social capital, no security whatsoever. Their livelihood is on tender hooks. This relationship between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law is the centerpiece. The families we make outside of bloodlines, the sisterhoods we forge from like experiences. Okay, so I need you guys to hang with me for a second. There's been a lot of Disney Plus. The two twins that were up here, they're mine, they're 8. And in pandemic times, we have Friday movie night. We've exhausted like all the options, so we're recycling. And we're going back to some older movies. So I realize I'm drinking the Disney Kool-Aid, and maybe this won't track with you guys, but we're gonna try. I wonder if maybe Ruth and Naomi could be the original Anna and Elsa. I don't know, let's give it a think. No, but really, I wonder what an epic sisterhood like Ruth and Naomi's offer a world. I have a friend who quizzed her daughters after Frozen came out a few years ago. She asked them, they were, I think, 10 and 8 at the time, who the hero of the story was. Without hesitation, one of her girls said, Kristoff. And I wonder if we, and by we I mean society, culture at large, if we are training our girls to see heroes as male only. I see that challenged a lot today, and I'm thankful for that. But beyond being outrageously problematic from a gender equality standard, it's scary to me that we are not teaching girls that they can be the heroes of their own stories. It's scary to me that we criticize women like Simone Biles for taking charge of their own bodies, their own health, their own destinies. In the intertwined story of Naomi and Ruth, we have the antidote to toxic masculinity, to masculinity that parades around as heroism. Naomi, who has lost everything, is destitute. She's swallowed by grief and has nothing to offer her daughter-in-laws. She tells them to head back to their parents' home, in essence allowing them to cut ties. Orpah does so, and who could blame her? She's a Moabite, as is Ruth. Moab isn't just an outsider country, it's almost like a known enemy state of Israel. And the two places are very hostile to each other. Jewish people did not exactly esteem folks like Ruth. That Ruth chooses to follow Naomi as a Gentile is very symbolic. We find Ruth at a crossroads in her life, and it is this moment that defines her. In words that become immortal, Ruth tells her mother-in-law, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." Listen, it's not like Ruth has more agency or more ability to pull her mother-in-law out of economic dire straits. This verse then becomes a stunning expression of faith and loyalty. And these two women forge ahead together, their destinies woven like Anna and Elsa, just a little bit, I think. What we see in the beginning of this story is an incredible set of circumstances that are hard for two widows to overcome. There's famine. Naomi's sons have died right before they could sire children, so there's isolation in the story too. Naomi is too old to start over. Her words, not mine, that's from the script. And Ruth has no progeny of her own. So barrenness, reinforced by the contextual famine, is also a theme here. This is a very bleak picture for the two of them. So Naomi and Ruth set off to Bethlehem, and as the story goes, Ruth begins to glean the grain fields of a farmer's nearby. Unbeknownst to her, it's Boaz's field. Boaz is a relative of Naomi's dead husband. Okay, so a couple interludes. Interlude number 1. Gleaning was a practice of leaving behind usable grain in the field for those in need after harvesting. It's described in Leviticus. Basically, it entails provision for the poor. So Ruth tells her mother-in-law that she's headed out to glean the field, and Naomi tells her, go ahead and go. The scripture here doesn't mention the women being worried, because this is an established practice, and Ruth knows she can provide for herself and her mother-in-law in this way. She doesn't wait for someone to show up and provide for her, but rather she acts. Interlude number 2, Boaz is her relative. This makes him a guardian redeemer. Again, Leviticus tells us that guardian redeemers have this obligation to redeem a relative in serious difficulty. Right? Ruth has also made a good reputation for herself because she's done this good deed by sticking with Naomi, so she's found favor in Boaz's eyes. This, coupled with his obligation to redeem, and it's not you should do this, it's almost like a legal obligation in those times. This coupling of obligation and his sort of respect for Naomi are going to provide for Ruth, and by extension, Naomi, security. In chapter 2, Boaz pays Ruth a compliment for her steadfast loyalty and wishes blessings upon her. He says, "May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Not but a chapter later, we see this very concept of wing refuge echoed, but this time by Ruth herself. She's on the threshing room floor. That's where they process the grain before there were big old machines. And Boaz is there. All of his workers are there. Ruth, they've all put in this really long, hard day. There's been a good meal. There's been good wine. And now it's time to turn in. And following Naomi's very specific instructions, Ruth boldly approaches Boaz at night and sleeps next to his feet. It's weird, whatever. Boaz wakes up. He's startled, asks who it is. And Ruth replies, "I am your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family." And I'm not sure, but I feel like there's some innuendo in there. But certainly, from a literary standpoint, we can appreciate the symmetry between God's wings and the skirts of Boaz's garments, providing refuge. Certainly, maybe we can see the divine irony. I don't know anything about foot fetishes, but y'all, Boaz replies with this. "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. "This kindness," I don't know, "this kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after a younger man, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character." That escalated quickly for me, but where it's gonna go is a short story. Anyway, there's apparently another guy who's more closely related to Naomi, and therefore by love right obligation, that younger guy should offer to marry Ruth. Boaz promises to look into it, but he seems in the text to desire Ruth for himself. The scriptures do not talk about beauty. They talk about honor. It's Ruth's good deeds. Her actions are what ultimately save her. She has created the circumstances that ensure her good future. The story ends, like all happy ones do, with good fortune. Boaz and Ruth marry. I've left out a couple details, but they marry. God blesses the union with a son. Naomi, that mother-in-law, cares for that child as if it were her own grandson. We are told that Ruth, who loves Naomi and is better to her than 7 sons, has renewed what was taken from Naomi. This is an idyllic tale, one with really no bad guys in it, one that holds up what ideal society should look like, how we ought to treat the other in our midst, how we ought to live. The book poignantly ends with the bloodline. We know the child's name is Obed. Obed becomes the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of great King David. Ruth, a foreigner, a Moabite, she becomes the ancestral grandmother of Jesus. So hopefully we've got this slide coming up. We move in the structure of the book of Ruth from emptiness to fullness. The course of Ruth's life does a complete about turn. And yes, the story is most definitely about God's provision. And yes, most definitely Boaz is a critical player in that provision. But these women ultimately saved themselves. That a book of scripture is dedicated to a woman who is not of Jewish birth, that she espouses ideal characteristics Jewish people aspire to, and that she is richly rewarded is so chiefly significant to me. Yes, 100%, this is a story of how to treat the stranger in our lands. We had Karen Gonzalez during that pandemic series when we were just virtual come and talk to us about it. She told us about the beauty of this story as an immigrant story. Certainly, with the events unfolding in Afghanistan, we can glean from this story a lot. But at its core, I also see a story of self-agency, of making a way for yourself despite the odds being stacked against you, about the strength of women and sisterhood. Ruth is depicted as noble, but she's also confident. She knows what kind of person she is, and that moral confidence allows her to make bold moves. The values of love, loyalty, faith, charity, and hospitality are fruits of righteousness. She steadfastly believes in God's word. She doesn't doubt herself. She knows she is good, beloved. How would that steadfast belief that you are good, beloved by God, alter your own actions, alter your own ways of securing your future? It's a good question. In the same way that the book of Ruth provides symmetry and a reversal of outcomes, Esther's too is a book of opposites, as biblical scholar Robert Alter points out. It reads like a juicy soap opera. I'm going to be honest, it's definitely less Disney, and it's really peculiar because in the entire book, God's name is never mentioned, not once. So Ruth's story unfolds in pre-exile days. Esther's telling happens after the Jews have been forced to flee and scatter. Where Ruth is a stranger in Jewish land, Esther is a Jewish orphan, a stranger living in Persia. So we have some symmetry there. The book of Esther is actually the origin story for the Jewish holiday Purim. So here are the players. We have our title character, Esther, who by a wild chance replaces a headstrong Persian Vashti as queen. Then we have the emperor king. His name is Ahasuerus. Can't say it correctly. My apologies to history. But we're just going to call him king or emperor for the rest of this story. He does not know that Esther is a Jew when he picks her out of obscurity to be his wife and queen. And then there's Mordecai, Esther's cousin, who steps in to act as guardian for the girl. And then we have Haman. He's the vice regent, think like royal council or vizier to the emperor. Haman is the ultimate bad dude, and he's promising a genocidal killing of the Jews. So here, this one's a little bit longer, so I've condensed this to the Cliff Notes version. The story opens with a lavish banquet, and there's feasting, and it's lasted several days. And on day 7 of really good libations, King Emperor A requests Queen Vashti's presence because he wants to show off her beauty. She refuses. The king consults his advisory circle, and they agree it's time to replace her because she's too headstrong. At the onset, we see a king very easily persuaded by those who surround him. At every turn in this story, he appears to be a passive king. His dialogue in the story is really short in contrast to the speeches of his council. He's ambivalent, perhaps, for sure passive, and most certainly malleable. Anyway, the plan is to replace Vashti with a better woman. So a bunch of virgins are rounded up, and they're trained in again, this is just my take, a very primeval version of like The Bachelor. I'm not joking, it's like 7 months, and they get anointed with perfumes and oils and trains, and just read it for yourselves. Because I think the emperor beds each of the 7 final contestants, and after the king loved Esther more than all the women, which I think is code word for something else. Anyway, Esther becomes queen. I don't know, you gotta read it. Mordecai, Esther's adoptive dad, tells her not to reveal her heritage. In the whole of almost a year that she's been cooped up in this bachelor pad contest, Mordecai has been visiting her. It seems that he has this premonition that his people could profit from gaining favor with the king. So some time passes as Esther is queen, and Mordecai refuses to kneel before Haman. Now remember, he's our antagonist. And it straight up angers Haman. Now, the king has decreed that people should show this type of deference, this bowing to his vizier. But day in and day out, Mordecai refuses to bow. So Haman, in his rage, sets up a plot to not only kill Mordecai, but all of the Jews. Now, a Jewish queen sits on the throne, but no one knows this. Haman approaches the emperor, concerned for a scattered people with different rules who don't observe the king's command. And shouldn't we do something about that? So passive and easily persuasive king gives Haman full royal authority. And essentially, a huge cash prize is offered to anyone who will kill a Jew. So this sets up scene for a genocide. Mordecai catches wind of the plan. He dons on sackcloth and ashes and basically stages a protest in the city. Jews catch word of the plan, and they all enter into mourning. Word gets to Queen Esther, and she is badly shaken by the news. These are, after all, her people. An important exchange between Esther and Mordecai occurs. Mordecai tells Esther that she must entreat the king. She tells him she can't simply just show up before him in court. She has to be summoned, and she hasn't been called to the bedroom in a month now, so she's a little worried that she's starting to lose favor in his eyes. If she seeks him out without being called into his presence, she could be sentenced to death. Again, we're reminded that women do not share the same sense of agency or power as their male counterparts, even when she is a queen. So Mordecai responds with basically 2 appeals. The first is, don't think you can escape the same fate from inside the palace walls. And then this one, for if you keep silent at a time like this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. So Esther asks Mordecai and her people to fast and pray, and she acts. With her cunning mind and using her beauty to her advantage, she boldly seeks the king in the inner court and asks for the king and Haman to come to a feast in their honor. There's a lot more that happens, but the gist is Esther sets Haman up. She reveals that she, along with her people, are to be annihilated and killed. And when the king demands to know who has dared level such a threat against his queen, Esther reveals then at that moment her Jewish identity. So of course Haman doesn't succeed in his nefarious plot. No, in the very gallows he had built for Mordecai, he is hanged. Mordecai himself is elevated to the emperor's inner circle, given Haman's position, in fact. It's all rather spectacular, but the Jewish people are saved thanks to Queen Esther. I wonder if a child were quizzed like a PG version of the story, who they would say the hero is of this tale. The king is simply a pawn. I think we can agree to that. Mordecai, virtuous and noble Mordecai, is still an accessory. No, the hero here is the orphan exile Esther, whose smart calculations and bold ask save her people. Now, I said this book, astonishingly, does not mention God's name once. Maybe there needed to be some disassociation from the... Anyway, not once. But it's clear to me, it is so clear to me how the divine uses a woman to save the Jewish people. Mordecai implores Esther, maybe even gives her a directive, but he offers no real advice, no strategy on how to approach an emperor or how to succeed in so dangerous a mission. No, Esther solves this problem on her own. She formulates a plan, activates it, patiently sets the trap, and sees it through, knowing her life and so much more is on the line. Like Ruth, she's not a passive character. She doesn't sit by and wait for her future to play out, her fate in the hands of someone else. So why short stories? Scholar Norman Gottwald suggests that the new purpose of the Israelite short story points to the active participation of people in common life. Put another way, the realm of the ordinary life with its ordinary people is the exact place where Yahweh works. These are lay stories. Sure, one takes place in a palace, but absent from both of them is formality or religious practice. Esther, setting a table for the feast. Ruth, gleaning a field. These become sacred spaces where God is doing some of their best work, which is to say, can't the changing table in a nursery, the waiting room of a hospital, the labor in a backyard garden, the work done through a computer screen or in a classroom, can't these be holy spaces too? The stories of these women make me wonder if we are perhaps not created for our own moment of greatness. If there isn't a simple time such as this playing out in our own narratives. I am still reeling from my mother's diagnosis, still sitting in profound grief over the loss of my grandmothers. The back half of this year feels so uncertain. I head back to teaching in the classroom really soon. Now I wrote likely still with my mask on, definitely still with my mask on, and I am bargaining. I am pleading, I'm begging God to keep my mother's spirit tethered to her body, because I cannot begin to think of the alternative. I am unsteady. That's like a really underwhelming word. I'm very unsteady. But I look to Ruth, I look to Esther, whose stories started with such uncertainty, devoid of hope. I see how God provided, how these women changed their futures despite great suffering. I see models for how to harness our own potentials. This series has been about re-examining scriptures, about scratching a little deeper. For some of us, it's about hearing some of these stories for the first time. I don't know where you sit in that continuum, but I hope that this series inspires you to crack open that sacred book or the app, no judgment, and make your own discoveries. Watershed, I'm going to close this out in prayer. I don't know if you're going to be able to make out the words because I'm fairly certain I'm going to start crying, but I want to enter into sacred space. I want my every action to be a ministry of presence. it feels too much, right? Like earthquakes in Haiti and deep suffering and travesty and death and loss in Afghanistan and work that's not going to be quite normal and pandemic that doesn't seem to end and such a politicized, divided mess among coworkers and friends, and Facebook is like toxic. It's too much. But if I reduce it down to the minute, to giving thanks for my morning coffee, to traveling mercies that allowed me to be here today with you, to the crinkly eyes I can see despite masks on, which tell me people are smiling. These are the things that matter. These are the things that become anchors in an unsteady world. Watershed, you're an anchor for me, and I thank you. In this pandemic, you are an anchor for me, and I thank you.
As we close this morning, I want to keep this mood, this energy going. Often we come into spaces like this and possibly expect to maybe be pulled out of or maybe gloss over the pain, the uncertainty, the fear, the anxiety. We're going to sing a song over you this morning. And so maybe you want to close your eyes. Maybe you want to open your hands. Maybe you want to stand up or stay seated. Just want to invite you to take whatever you need in the next few moments. The chorus is very simple. It says, "Set me free." And that means so many things to so many different people. Because whatever the things are that are keeping us from being free are as different as we are. So I want to give you space this morning. Space to breathe, space to just be. Falling is easy. Staying in love is hard. Hard to be honest and keep your heart open to be who we truly are without excuses, without the facade. There's no pretending. Here in your love, Lord, set me free. Lord, set me free. the sails of my heart. Here I am, here you are.
The sails of my heart. Here I am, here you are. I let out the sails of my heart. Oh, here I am, here you are.
I let out the sails of my heart. Here I am, here you are. Oh, I let out the sails of my heart. Here I am, here you are. I let out the sails of my heart. Oh, here I am, here you are. Oh, I let out the sails of my heart. Oh, here I am, here you are. Let out the sails of my heart. Here I am, here you are. Let out the sails of my heart. Here I am, here you are. Set me free. Set me free. Set me free. God, this morning, freedom feels maybe unattainable. There's so many things right now that are keeping us from being truly free. But God, if there was ever a time, for such a time as this, God, freedom matters. And we remember that freedom cannot be on the backs of pain and hurt and heartbreak for others. And so, God, may our freedom be wrapped up in the freedom of everyone, not just our individual freedoms, not just our own space that just matters to us, but may we be able to see the freedom of others as our responsibility. And so, God, as we go from this place this morning, may we live with the kind of love that moves us to that freedom. May we be people who love extravagantly, not just when it's easy, Not just when it makes sense, not just when it's loving people who look and act like us, but may we love in the hard ways when it's our enemies. We thank you, God, for this space, these people, and this room where we can be ourselves, we can show up, we can learn, we can grow, we can feel all of our feelings. We thank you, God. We love you, we love each other, and we pray all this in your name. Amen. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Hope you'll join us next week and make plans to stay after service for the summer bash. Have a good Sunday. We'll see you next week.